Welcome to the Steady On podcast, where God's hard truth meets your hard story. I don't need to tell you that life gets hard. Life gets hard, really hard. But God's faithfulness is still active and alive in our hard. And these episodes are dedicated to remembering and claiming the promises of a faithful God. I'm your host, Angie Bauman. I'm a pastor and Bible teacher, founder of Steady On Ministries, and creator of the Step-by-Step Bible Study Method. But more than that, I'm a trauma and abuse survivor who carried a heavy weight of shame and worthlessness for many years. And I still struggle, but I live in much more freedom now because I know God through His Word and speak truth to the lies of the enemy with His Word. And that's what we do here. On Mondays, we take it in by studying the promises of God. And on Wednesdays, we live it out with teaching and testimony on the promises of God. So thank you for tuning in, my friend. You are the reason for this show. And I'm so very, very glad you are here. Let's get started. Welcome, friend. This is a special episode for so many reasons. When I began podcasting almost 3 years ago and had absolutely no idea what I was doing, if you had told me then I would celebrate 200 episodes, I would have thought you crazy. But here we are at 200 episodes. Beyond that, actually, because I don't number the bonus episodes, but officially at 200 episodes, and the ways God has taught and grown me through conversations recorded to share with you are too numerous to count. Even though reviewing those conversations is exactly where God took me, and I'm pleased to share with you the only episode I've ever done that is a compilation of looking back. The following moments are ones that stood out to me for a lot of reasons, but what they all have in common is how they have helped me grow in my understanding of and ability to live out with more success our verse for this week and my verse for the year. It is 2 Chronicles 20:17a. The battle is not for you to fight. Take your position, stand still, and see the victory of the Lord on your behalf. Our word for this week, which is unpacked in Monday's episode with Matt, and my word for the year is stand. It's only August, but I've already learned so much about this word. First, I approached it incorrectly. I initially thought it was God's call for me to be more firm, more confident, more steady, to not shrink back, be scared, play small. I wasn't wrong about that. That is exactly what God is calling me to do. But my error was in understanding where that ability comes from. I felt like He was calling me to stand still, immovable, unshakable. He's calling me to surrender, to lay down, to be weak even, because standing and stillness comes from dependence on Him. Practically speaking, He's changing the way my trauma brain works when I'm in a fight. For as long as I can remember, my first reaction when life isn't smooth is shame. Shame is my go-to emotion, and over the past few years, as I've gotten in touch with how friendly shame and I are, I have prayed for release. I prayed like Paul prayed when he talks about crying out to God to please remove this thorn from the flesh, and God didn't do it. And I had decided like Paul that God wasn't going to do it because, and I believe this with all my heart, His strength is made perfect in my weakness. And so I thought shame is my thorn, my weakness, the thing that kept me from getting that big head and depending on myself. And it was actually God's love and provision that left it with me. But friend, this year I've learned that isn't what He wants for me anymore. I'm experiencing and living in freedom I didn't know possible. On a good day, I feel a sense of flying. That's a joy I've never felt before. On not so good days, I look around wondering where the other shoe is going to fall and if it's going to take me out when it does. I am a work in progress. Which leads me to the second thing I'm learning about stand. God doesn't want His children to play small. He doesn't want us crouching down in fear, praying for the battle to be over. He wants us to know whatever happens around us or to us, we will be okay. Victory is ours. Why? Because victory is already His and we are His. And in a way, I'll not understand this side of heaven. What is His is mine because He said so. So these moments, some longer than others, are pieces of interviews that did and do help me stand still. I'll introduce you to each guest and give a bit of context before each clip. And before we say hello to the first guest, I want to say one more thing to you, and that is thank you. At the time I'm recording this, Steady On podcast episodes have been downloaded over 23,000 times. That's a whole lot of listening to me talking. I didn't know I'd be here. I don't know how long I will be here. Only God knows, but He knew I needed this. He knew it would bring healing and hope and growth and standing. That's what it's done for me. In His kindness, He's brought us together. You've listened as I've learned, and I am incredibly grateful. So let's listen in. We're going to get started with one of the episodes I think about all the time, my interview with singer-songwriter and Dove Award nominee Christy Nockels. Christy was episode 46, and I was still so new at what I was doing. I remember sitting at my desk with the Zoom room open, wondering if she's really going to show up. I thought about the songs I love so much. Welcome to Delaware, More Than You'll Ever Know, Grace Flows Down. I wanted so much for her to know what her music had meant to me, but I also wanted to be a professional, not a fangirl. I was proud of myself for being brave, at the same time wondering what on earth I was thinking by inviting her on the show. She was delightful, of course, and I still think of the warmth and wisdom in her voice. This moment from the interview helps me stand, though, because Christy is talking about God's love for us when we have nothing to offer. And it helps me remember God isn't waiting on me to be more than I am before He loves me. He loves me for what I do for Him, yes, but that's not why He loves me. He just loves me. Let's listen in.
Kind of embarrassing, but I talk about that there was just this little perch that we had. It wasn't a porch. It wasn't big enough to be a porch. It was just this little perch that we had off of the laundry room in the house that I grew up in, which was just tiny. And I remember that was the spot where, God was speaking to me, but also I remember I specifically had a season in my life where I would go sneak a little handful of dog food, and I would sample dog food. We're getting real here,
I love it.
Yeah. And I remember literally feeling a little bit shameful because it didn't taste all that bad to me. And I was kind of like, that's not bad, But but what I love about that is it just gives you such a clear picture of just how amazing is God when we are just these little snotty-nosed kids, or whatever stage you're in life, whenever He meets you where you are. But it's just like I had nothing to offer Him. And He, in His Father's love over me, swooped down in those days and called me His beloved. I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
And so I became His beloved at 7. And I think why I'm so passionate about remembering who I am, without all that I do, it's because all that I do eventually, when I was in my 30s, got in the way of that.
Yeah. All I did got in the way of all I was at age 7, and somehow I lost sight of how beloved I was to God. That's powerful to me. Remembering not to confuse what I do with who I am, a daughter of the Most High, helps me stand. And speaking of daughters, I love this next reminder from Devon White. She's talking about the woman in Scripture with the issue of blood and how she reaches out to Jesus in her pain and how He publicly calls her daughter. There's something about that scene that makes me less afraid to bring my struggle to Him publicly. Sometimes I think you all get tired of hearing me talk about my trauma, abuse, and the years that it has plagued me. But God calls me to work through some of those things publicly, to be honest about what threatens to isolate me from community, so much like this woman. And as she boldly reached out to Him, I want to do that too. And because her example encourages me, my hope is that my example encourages someone else. And even if I'm crawling on my hands and knees toward Him in desperation, it is an act of standing that I do so. And when we reach for Him, He reminds us that we are, always have been, always will be, His child. Let's listen in.
Then the most beautiful, and we is the woman with the issue of blood. And of course, she's just like, if I can just touch Him, if I can just touch Him, I will be well. 12 years of bleeding. We can get into that. I mean, what an awful, awful thing. Not only ghosted from her physical body, but from her everything, from every celebration, from touching her family members, from everything. But here's what Jesus says to her after she touches Him and He realizes it. He says, daughter. That's huge in that culture. And if we look at, the culture of the Middle East, family is everything. To be called daughter, that had to just fill her. And he says, your faith has healed you. Daughter. And what a statement he made that everyone heard as he called her daughter.
This next clip from John Fugler is another one of my favorites because it's so dang practical. It's brilliant. John talked with me about creating intimacy with Jesus and what it meant to really be in relationship with him. The idea of Jesus riding bikes and sipping a Diet Coke at McDonald's brings a smile to my face every time I think of it. And inviting Jesus into my everyday is another way I grow in my ability to stand. Let's listen in.
So one time I got on my bike and said, Jesus, I want to take you to some of the places I like to go to. Let's go together. And so I went on a bike ride with Jesus. It may sound crazy, but no, we went to the local McDonald's where I sit and have my Diet Coke, and we talked a little bit there, went on a biking trail, and we went on a little bit of a walk, and I memorized some scripture, and I just wanted to show him where I go, as if he didn't know. But that's what you do with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
You do things with a friend. And I just wanted this to be, I just want to do some things with Jesus today.
Yeah.
Just me and God.
I love that.
And so we did that. So,
yeah. Inviting God in goes hand in hand with following him. We invite him in to converse with him and share with him, yes. And we invite him in to lead us, guide us. My next guest is Antoinette Cleveland, and she joined me to talk about the impact frequent moves has on a family unit. My frequent moves as a child were not easy, and I believe they made me vulnerable to the abuse I endured in my teenage years, and so I was drawn to her story. But the moment that stood out to me the most from this conversation was this one, where Antoinette talks about how we can know where God is and where he's leading us. Let's listen in.
Matthew 6:33, God, what is your way? How do you want us to look at this opportunity? Is it for us to move, or is it for us to stay? When you look at Numbers, the 9th chapter, and I believe it starts at the 15th verse and it goes on down, when Moses was leading the children of Israel, there was a cloud that hovered over the tabernacle, and the children of Israel knew when to move based upon when that cloud moved. And so we have to ask ourselves, is the cloud moving? And if the cloud is moving, then I need to move with the cloud. The whole family needs to move with the cloud. If it is not moving, then we know to stay. So which direction is God moving? That is the ultimate question. God, which direction are you taking us? What is your will and your plan for right now?
Is the cloud moving? That's the right question to ask, isn't it? Sometimes other questions seem like they're the right questions, like, how is this going to affect me? Or am I going to like this? What will it cost me? But the right question always is, what would God have me do? Following him is an act of trust, and knowing he will always lead me in a way that is for my good, not that it's easy, but it's for my good, helps me to stand. In this next clip, I'm interviewing Nate and Kate Thompson. They're talking with me about the content of their book Between Sundays, which focuses on practicing spiritual disciplines and means of grace outside of church services. I absolutely love them. And I'm pretty sure they had no idea how personal this moment, talking about taking communion at home with their family, was to me. I am a licensed pastor in the United Methodist Church, and the UMC has strict rules about where licensed pastors can serve communion. I am a rule follower. And when God began to call me to serve in a pastoral role outside the UMC, I got really messed up in a tangle of people-pleasing and rule following around communion that brought a ton of angst and shame and greatly limited my obedience to his call. I kind of laugh about it now, but I think I really thought that there were people like communion police waiting to haul me off to communion jail for not serving the sacrament in the precise way the UMC required. It took a while to untangle, and now I am free, thank goodness. But as I listened to Kate talk about the blessing of taking communion with her family, I could stand a little stronger in the choice I'd made, and I felt God smile down upon me in affirmation and blessing. Let's listen in.
The main things I think of usually is taking communion, because it was so different for me. And I remember when I was a teenager, I had like a health problem come up, and his parents said, well, we should take communion and remember the blood of Jesus. And that, by his stripes we are healed. And they would say scriptures and stuff like that. And I remember taking communion with his mom and his dad and with Nate, and his sisters had their own families, so they were out of the house. But yeah, that was just like a solid memory. And that's something that we still do now. And we've definitely gone in stages where we're better about it. Hasn't always been just like an uphill trajectory. There's been some times when you aren't as solid or disciplined in reading your Bible or taking communion, but that's something that I never would have thought of to do at home.
Isn't that gorgeous? That moment still means a great deal to me. Thank you, Kate, all over again for speaking that truth. You have no idea how much I felt God stir my spirit as you shared from your heart. Kristen Bathen is another guest who shared from her heart. Kristen lives in my community, actually, and I met her when she was taking some new headshots of me. Since then, she's served our family by taking photos several times, and I absolutely adore her. She and her husband were fostering a child when I first got to know her. And during the photo shoot, I spontaneously asked her to share her story on the show. I'm so glad I trusted my instinct in that moment because her sweet voice rings out with power and conviction and faith in a God who will never let us down. Kristen is standing on her trust in the Lord, and her confidence helped me stand as well. Let's listen in.
I have seen God provide in such incredible ways. And I know that he will take care of us regardless of what happens. He will take care of our emotions. He will take care of our heartbreak. He will take care of anything that happens. Doesn't mean he'll take the heartbreak away.
Right.
Doesn't mean he'll take the tears away. That's not how it works. But I know he will take care of us, and he will give us exactly what we need. And that's what he's shown us these past 3 years already. So what makes me think he's not going to continue that?
Now here's a moment where I almost fell apart. Seriously, I don't know what I was thinking. My guest was Stacey Thacker, and she had written a book called The Threadbare Prayer about praying desperate prayers to God. In the early days of the podcast, I did all the interviews live on Facebook. Then I taught myself how to drop them as a podcast. So this is episode 39 from when I was still doing all of them live. I had no idea how to edit anything, so I literally just dropped the live interview as a podcast. Stacey at one point said she wouldn't consider herself a prayer warrior. And somehow I didn't stop myself from pushing back on that. I could have died right there, except we were live, so I couldn't. But you know what? Stacey and I are still connected on Facebook. I still watch what she's doing from afar, and we still comment back and forth from time to time. And as I thought about this at the time, this mortifying moment, I realized sometimes standing is encouraging someone else to do what you struggle to do. It's so easy for me to play small. And that's what I saw in Stacey that day. And I wanted to tell her, don't you do that. You stand where God has placed you. And somehow offering that to her helps me do it too. Even though I still can't believe I did this. Let's listen in.
I would never, ever use the word prayer warrior to describe myself in the sense that I've been with those people, the people that I feel like pray down fire and they're like, woo, God, they have a special connection. But this daily, I pray constantly is definitely, I don't know that, I guess maybe I just don't feel like a warrior. I don't know. Maybe there's some other term for it, but I just feel like it's so sweetly relational that there's an intimacy. It provides this intimacy, I think, that we have that kind of access through Christ and his sacrifice for us. It makes me want to pray, quite frankly.
Well, I'm gonna challenge you on that, even though we just met, because I think a warrior is someone who fights smart. I don't know, but I hear what you're saying about this dramatic thing. But I think your husband, and we haven't talked about this specifically, but I know your husband, you nearly lost your husband and it was really scary. And I know that was a long process. You have a daughter that at least did or still does fight a really challenging illness. And that could take you down, right? But you have said, no, I'm going to stay connected to the one that keeps strengthening me.
Mm.
And so I'm going to, you don't have to wear the tag, but I'm going to put the tag on you.
Wow. That's you're sweet.
It's a
You're
smart,
sweet.
it's a person who knows how to fight smart. And I think that's what
Mm.
prayer does for us. You know, it helps us battle. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, absolutely. I think it's included
thing,
in
yes.
it's
Mhm,
included
yes.
in the spiritual armor
Yes.
because it's what
Yes.
unites all the pieces of the
Right.
armor.
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. I
Go
receive
ahead.
that. I receive it. But here, I think for me, I just feel I just feel unlikely. Like
Oh.
I feel like an unlikely representative. I guess we'll just say that.
And there's no Bible stories about unlikelies in there. I'm just
yeah. Good point. Well taken. Point.
Stacy's like, exit meeting. I'm not.
No,
I'm
just
out of
kidding.
here.
No, I just feel like here's
hear
what I
you.
think. I
No.
think a lot of people, and me being one of them, think, oh, my pastor prays. Like,
Yes.
he prays. And there's these women at my church who were on the prayer team, and they are unbelievable. And they've
Yes.
prayed over me before.
Yes.
And I have felt
Yes.
energized in the presence of the Lord. I'm saying that I would never say, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
But I pray constantly.
Yeah.
And so, whereas when I say I don't feel like I'm a warrior, it's like I don't know that when people think of me, maybe before I wrote the book, that they would go, oh yeah, she's prayer warrior. But what I've seen happen as life has gotten really hard, and I've had these seasons of feeling hidden, definitely, and I've felt hopeless and my heart has been broken, is that through prayer, I have clung to the hem of his robe.
Yikes. I cringe at the uncomfortableness and backpedaling in my voice. And yet I'm so grateful for how speaking that truth to her helped me hear it for myself too. We are unlikely servants, all of us, and we are warriors, prayer or otherwise. Stacy is a warrior that helped me grow, and she was an incredibly gracious guest who holds a special place in my heart. Something else that affirmed me greatly was this brief moment with my podcasting mentor, Alana Dawson. I have a great deal of respect for Alana and was so grateful for her willingness to share her story on the show. Towards the end of it, she publicly praised me, which made me a bit uncomfortable, but I heard God encourage me to do my best to receive it and even to believe it. Alana wanted to bless me with kindness and encouragement, and I realized again in this moment how quick I am to deflect or reject the compliments other people offer me. This moment helped me stop doing that, helped me trust that other people mean it when they say kind things about me and my work, not so I'll get a big head or something, but again, so I'll stop trying to be invisible. So I'm sharing this from Alana because who she is describing is who I have always wanted to be for you. And I'm trying my very best to believe it is who I am. And that's another way I stand. Let's listen in.
Angie, thanks for having me. And if I can just speak out, guys, I will take very little credit for Angie has a heart for you. She has such a heart for helping women. And I absolutely love what you're doing here, Angie. And you do it very well to the glory of the Lord. So I'm just grateful for you.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that so much. Something else that helps me stand is appreciating my uniqueness. And no one has described our inability to or the importance of appreciating our uniqueness as profoundly as Lori Kaler. Lori's books are so good. They help us see God in nature and experience his goodness and faithfulness through creation. When I met Lori, I had recently taught a precept study on the book of Genesis, and through that study, God really began to help me make friends with nature, something I had never really been able to do before. That's when I started taking my walks around our campus lake and pausing more and more to see him in the sky and trees and flowers all around me. He's everywhere, and I love that he is. This moment with Lori helped me have a deeper understanding of what God teaches us through creation and how that can help us stand stronger in who he calls us to be. Let's listen in.
You know, I thought when we go out in nature, we don't want it to look like every tree is exact and it looks like it's just been made on a computer and they're all the same size and they're all the same color and they're all this, same height and they're all, We don't want that. That would not be pleasurable at all. We don't want all the birds to be gray and sing the same song. We want variety. And we have never been in nature and said, you know, that tree is just too tall, or that tree is just too fat, or that tree is just too whatever. We never say that. In fact, my nephew's a woodworker, and he prizes these trees that have these big, gnarly, like warts and lumps on them. They're called galls or burls. And woodworkers know that those ugly little lumps and warts, you cut those off and you make the most beautiful bowls out of them. They have this, this beautiful, it's not like a straight wood grain. It's this swirly, marbly thing. And, you know, we know that this makes the most beautiful bowls. And so we celebrate these things that are different in nature, you know, the possibly long legs of the flamingo, the outrageous colors. And yet when it comes to ourselves, it's like, oh no, I need to look like Jennifer Lopez or Lady Gaga or Christy Brinkley or whatever crazy, you know, person we have on our mind. And
on our perfect idea, right?
Yeah. And, you know, I used to, I would be so angry because my feet are huge. They're size 12. And, you know, when you're growing up and...
Are your feet? She says, me too. You have 12 feet?
Yeah. And all growing up, you know, you grow up in Wisconsin, you want to go skating with your friends. And I would go into a store and be like, okay, what's the biggest skate you had? Oh, don't worry, honey, we have your size. I'm like, no, really, what? And they're, whatever your size you have, we have, you know. Okay, I'm at 12. Oh, we don't have anything that big. And of course, I would dissolve into tears and feel like I'm ugly. And in fact, I love my mother to death. But she did say to me once when I was trying on clothes, she goes, you know, honey, the canary wears yellow. The elephant wears gray. Oh. Because she didn't want me to wear this brightly colored thing over, you know. So, I mean, even now I'm 6 feet tall. I vary between size 10 and 12. And I could think, oh, you know, I'm just too fat. No, I'm not. I'm normal. I'm fine. But we, you know, do it. Yes. So here's the secret. Here's the secret to getting over this. Just as we appreciate all the differences in nature, the way to appreciate your body is to start thanking it for what it's done for you. Have you been pregnant with a child? Have you been able to do that? That's incredible. Not everybody can. You know, maybe your upper arms are more flabby than you want, but who have you hugged? Who have you hugged with your arms? Do you think when you were hugging them that they thought, oh, wait a minute, just how big are those arms? Or did they want to feel loved and embraced? You know, what have you looked at? What sunsets have you enjoyed with your eyes? Not everybody can see. You know, what have you heard? Have you heard a child or a loved one say, I love you? Not everybody can hear. So start thanking your body for what it's done for you. You know, I could thank my body for like, wow, I hiked up in the Sierras and wow, I've been scuba diving, but it's the little things. I held my son in my arms. I mean, when I started doing this with my body, just thanking all the parts, and P.S., I'm glad my feet are big because I, you know, became an NCAA All-American swimmer and because I had my own flippers. So it's okay. Yeah.
You make it work for you.
Yeah, make it work for you. So I think when we start thanking our bodies for how they've performed for us, you get a whole different view on that. And you also start treating yourself better.
Isn't that awesome? Listen, my arms are too flabby and my thighs are too thick, my friend. But I can't tell you how often when I am tempted to focus on that, I think back to Lori's wise words and fight back those thoughts with her truth. Moments of self-doubt can take us down, but God's promise he creates us and calls us good helps us stand. Okay, last but not least, this is a funny moment from Jill Bond talking about her time serving as the Chick-fil-A cow. It's a hilarious story about how crazy dreams do sometimes come true, and it makes me laugh every time I think of it. And I think it's a perfect way to conclude this looking back. Let's listen in.
I was at a basketball banquet at our church, and the Chick-fil-A cow, you have Chick-fil-A in Illinois, don't you?
We do. Yes. Thank goodness.
I know.
I don't want to do life without Chick-fil-A.
The Chick-fil-A cow was the mascot. You know, they were the sponsors of the banquet at my church. And that cow came in and high-fived all the kids. And I turned to my husband. The cow looked like she was having such a good time. And I turned to my husband and I said, that looks like fun. I bet I could do that. And he's used to me saying things like that. And he just said, yeah, you really should. Why don't you do it? So a few months went by, we were at a Chick-fil-A eating one day, and he said, why don't you go out and talk to the manager and see about putting on that cow suit? I thought, oh, I've been busted. So what could I do but go up to the manager? I asked for the manager, and I asked him that very question. I said, what does it take to put on that cow suit and just do a few gigs, you know? And he looked like he was very thoughtful for a minute. He said, what does it take? A pulse. It takes a pulse. That's all it takes. No talent, no brains, no nothing else. It takes a pulse. So I asked him for an application, which he gave me. And I looked at it. It was clearly intended for an adolescent looking for a part-time job. So I thought, well, I'll have a little fun with this. So I took it and I worked up a portfolio to die for. I called the HR lady and said, you know, I'd like to make an appointment for a job interview. And so we were to meet at the mall. I sent for my college transcripts, everything, my resume, everything. And I had been teaching for quite a while at that point. I taught English at Virginia Commonwealth University for a long time. So, you know, I put that on my resume. I just put it all on there. I dressed to the nines for this interview and met her at the mall. She was really young and taking this whole thing just way too seriously. But I thought, this is going to be great. I wish I could remember the questions she asked me. I don't, but at the end of the interview, she stood up. And so I stood up and she stuck out her hand and said, I am pleased to offer you the position of area market cow for Chick-fil-A. I thought, this is great. This is the best job interview I have ever had. So we set up a few gigs. I think I did it 5 times. Got to throw out a pitch at a ball game and all. I found out I was extremely claustrophobic. Have you ever been in a suit like that before?
I have not.
It's hideous. It is hideous. So anyway, but a year after I made that declaration, that looks like fun, I was the cow at the same basketball banquet. I thought, this is full circle.
Sometimes things do come full circle. And I thank you, Jill, for reminding us of that. All of these looking back moments help me stand. But as I said in the introduction, here's the thing I'm learning the most this year as I'm sitting with this word and listening to the Lord teach me through it. Standing is actually about surrender. It's not about being stronger in my resources. It's about trusting Him more. So ultimately, the thing all of these moments have in common for me is they've helped strengthen my trust in Jesus. And because of that, they help me stand. Again, our verse this week and mine for the year is 2 Chronicles 20:17 in the NRSV. It says, this battle is not for you to fight. Take your position, stand still, and see the victory of the Lord on your behalf. And if you haven't yet, I highly encourage you to listen to Monday's Take It In, where my husband Matt is my co-host to help me celebrate this episode 200 milestone. And we have a lot of fun and some deep conversation about what it means to stand. Next week, our Take It In verse will be Philippians 1:6 that reminds us that God will not leave a work incomplete. And my guest will be Julia Fixie. Julia will talk to us about dealing with a food addiction from the time she was a small child and how God has helped her overcome it by coming to Him for fullness and satisfaction. It's a tremendous testimony you won't want to miss. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would pick today to subscribe to the podcast. It helps the show a great deal, and it guarantees you'll see every episode as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. Today and every day prior, I mean it, friend. Thank you. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.